say Levi. Levi from
It's
Georgia
Levi.
wants to. Okay, thanks, Levi. Levi from Georgia, you're here to talk to us and wants to talk to us about your reasoning on why God is real. I'd love to hear it, Levi. Welcome to Truth Wanted.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. So there's a few points I want to bring up. I'm not sure like how long I'll get on here, but my reasoning is rather more of why God does exist rather than why he like does not exist. And so there's a couple of points I have brought up here, but are you ready for me to go ahead and explain them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, try to be as brief as you can, right? Remember, we got an audience here and,
Yeah,
they want to be
of
entertained
course.
here. Not saying that, you should be funny or anything, but just, as brief as you can will be great.
Okay, so, well, first, there's the order and complexity of the universe. So, to keep it short, the universe's precise laws, gravity, electromagnetism, and fine-tuned constants, cosmological constants allow life to exist. The odds of this happening by chance are astronomically low, suggesting a purposeful, intelligent design.
Okay.
Do you
we can start with that point if you want, because I already have some thoughts about that. Is that okay with you?
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this idea, a common analogy to this is called the watchmaker's argument, right? And it's kind of this idea of like, wow, if you look at like a watch that's like on the sand, you would see that it has to be created because, we compare it against its surroundings, right? You don't just find a watch like on the sand by itself. It doesn't just be self-made. Somebody had to make that watch, right? But the thing with that analogy is we are comparing it to nature, right? Because we see a man-made object and we compare it to everything else. And so that's where that contrast happens. Now, when it comes to physical laws of the universe, we don't have anything to compare it to. Like that is nature within itself. Every one of our observations on probability, for example, included, come from those constants being there. So it can become sort of a self-referential thing. We can't even evaluate the odds of the constants being there without existing in a universe with those constants. So to me, that kind of argument is sort of a non-starter. It doesn't mean that God can't be real necessarily, but it does mean that it kind of evens things out. It doesn't really point one way or the other for me. Does that make sense?
It does. I was just thinking more of like how can everything come from nothing point of view. But there's a few more points that I have if you're willing.
Yeah, and we'll listen to that too. And I wanted Christina to jump in, but I will say to that point, right? When it comes to arguments from nothing, you could say the same thing about God, right? God isn't any more explainable than the universe coming from nothing. And I'm not saying I know where the universe comes from, okay? I'm not even saying it has to come from something specifically. It may just be what it is, but it doesn't give any more credence to God, right? Because God has the same exact issue at the end of the day. But Christina, you're nodding your head. You want to add to this?
Because it's like, I understand, right? The universe, when we look at nature, it is very intricate, right? It is very, it seems like there had to be something, a mind, an intelligent mind that created it. But then, okay, what created God? Like, where did God come from? And it's just filling in. It's just filling in the gaps of what we don't understand with something, because as humans, we feel the need to plug something in there to the space that we don't know. But like Dan said, you'll have God runs into the same issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, they say it's a paradox that the universe came from nothing and everything just exists because of a paradox or whatever it may be. But if you think about it, we should all just be sitting in a black void, non-existent, just nothing. Just nothing should.
Why should we be?
Right?
Why?
Why should we be?
Yeah.
Why should we be?
Why is it more likely that we would be in a black void versus how we exist now? Tell me how we figure that out.
Well, because simply, if you have no laws, no nothing, no rules, how anything reacts to anything, like like let's say, you know, you pour acid on a certain chemical, it makes another chemical. Like that, who made those rules? Why does that even exist? Why is that even a thing in my mind? And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, there has to be some sort of designer who made the rules, whether it be aliens, whether it be God, whether it be, you know, a simulation we're living in. Not exactly sure, but
But
you know,
but that's just natural, isn't it? Like if you mix certain chemicals together, they have a reaction. That happens in nature. That doesn't speak to the mind of a god or anything like that. It doesn't
Yeah.
answer that question.
Yeah, I think to
and
bolster Christina's point, you know, we're seeing observations, right?
Yeah.
But we're not seeing intention or creation. We're just seeing observations. We're just seeing things as they are. It could be that things are the way they are because they're the way they are. There may not have to be a rhyme or reason, but I see evidence of things existing every day. I don't see that same evidence for God or his actions in that every day.
okay. I mean, I get where you're coming from. I don't necessarily, you know, agree with it, but you know, everybody has their own opinion and they're entitled to it. You know, if I went down my family's testimonies of, you know, how you know, lumps just completely disappeared, cancerous lumps completely disappeared from my family's, you know, bodies, whatever it may be, after prayer. Now, of course, this is not solid evidence, but doctors have sat there and stated we have no idea how this happened.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
there's things like that make me definitely question, you know, when doctors go, okay, yeah, this was definitely not supposed to happen. You were supposed to have surgery, but instead it's completely gone. There's things like that, and it
There isn't
definitely,
such.
you know,
I'm sorry.
Go
Well,
ahead,
there is
Christina.
a such thing as like spontaneous remission, right? So we know that there are certain things that your body can go into remission in. But when you're under treatment and things like that, I think we don't leave enough space for the like the logical conclusion or the logical entailment there. If they're undergoing treatment, if they're undergoing like for whatever it is, even if it's not cancer, but like if it's another disease that we act like there aren't medical professionals who are utilizing their skill and their education and working with our own bodies and medications to help kind of help our bodies heal. We just give the glory of healing to God. And again, I think we leave a lot of space for God when the credit and should, if anything, go to those medical professionals and our own bodies for doing what we do.
Yeah. An organization, the Templeton Foundation,
with that.
studied this, and they studied patients who were sick with, I believe it was cancer and other things. And they did a control group with people who were prayed for and who ostensibly weren't prayed
You're talking
for.
about the Great Prayer Test, and it was
Yeah,
after cardiology. Yeah, the Great Prayer study that was
right.
based on heart patients with, I believe they had heart surgery, and yeah, it didn't really show any significant differences in the what was it in the outcome. Actually, the
Mhm.
people who weren't prayed for had a better outcome,
That's right.
unfortunately.
Right. And
But yeah,
some of the
yeah.
speculation for that was because they felt that people who were being prayed for were under a kind of stress or pressure that was sort of unburdened for them, right? Now this is one study, and medical studies, you know, have to, you know, medical studies are the way they are for a reason. But you know, it's interesting that you're knowledgeable of that because, I mean, again, we can point to all kinds of people who also have had spontaneous remission from cancer who ostensibly are atheists, ostensibly don't have people that are praying for them, and they seem to, you know, get about as well as the same rate. The truth is, there's just a lot that we don't know about cancer and how it works, but
Yeah.
the treatment that we do give to it, you know, does work when it does, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how that
Yeah.
leads me to believe that a God is more or less real. If anything, it just kind of leads me to believe less, right?
Yeah, yeah, I see that. I mean, I definitely understand all points of the arguments, and honestly, I love everybody the same. You know, atheist or not atheist, everybody's a human being, and we should all show more love to each other. So, I mean,
I
I get
appreciate
what
that.
you mean. Um,
Yeah, but so I appreciate that you do. It sounds like you do understand it, but it sounds like you're not convinced by those arguments. Is there? I'm just curious. Is there a reason why you don't find those arguments convincing?
Well, there is a few things, and it's just I've had prayers answered in the right time. I mean, this is going off of just my heart, not even really scientific evidence, but I've researched, atheism. I've researched, because I've almost switched to atheism. I was like, well, why does anything even make sense, And so I've researched it, and all the research, scientific research. I don't just research the Bible or whatever, but every scientific and historical research that I've ever done, it always leads me to that, there is a maker, creator, a God. He is real. Whether we understand him or not, I've tried to be atheist, but whenever you think about things like improbability of life's biochemical assembly, the odds of a single functional protein forming by chance are about 1 in 10 over 164. For 150 amino acid chain from 20 amino acids with cells requiring 4,000 proteins, averaging 300 amino acids each, the total probability of life emerging from abiogenically drops to 1 in 10 over 282, far beyond the 10 over 80 atoms in the observable universe, making undirected chemical evolution statistically impossible. So,
Can I ask you a
there's
question?
things that I think about. What's that?
Christina?
Because you brought up a point about God answering your prayers in time. How has God? Have you ever prayed and God not answered?
I have, but I've had many prayers not answered by God. But I always say before my prayer, God, your will be done. And if it's not in his will, then I guess it won't happen. I don't know.
So, like, heads I win, tails you lose.
What's that?
So it's like, if it does happen, then God gets the glory. If it doesn't happen, then it's God's will, so God still gets the glory. How can you verify that any prayer is being answered at all?
Well, it's actually you cannot verify anything that God does. Now, whenever you pray to God, you have to come to God, with your heart, not a scientific study, not anything like that. You have to come to prayer with God by your heart. So there's no way I can prove that he's real. I can just prove how he's not real, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see it like it's interesting. So like you can't verify God at all, is what you're really telling me.
You cannot verify God at all. And I'm one believer who will sit here and speak very logical and very scientifically about it. I will not sugarcoat. I will say there's no way you can prove him, but you can prove that he's not who he says he is, that he's not there.
Yeah, I hear that. It sounds like you're convinced by arguments that claim the improbability for atheism, let's call it. I don't really like phrasing it that way, but that's how a lot of Christians tend to phrase it. So to borrow that phraseology, right? It's sort of like, well, these are the odds of God not being a thing, right? And you gave some examples of that with your interpretation of abiogenesis, among some other facts, right? And so I tend to, find that kind of curious because, again, talking about probabilities is not something you can do in a vacuum, right? Especially when we're talking about the odds of, proteins folding or whatever, right? Like that doesn't, that entirely depends on the conditions in which something takes place, right? So the odds of a protein being created in my jar of peanut butter is not the same thing as it happening at the bottom of an ocean in hydrothermal vents, right? So, there's some differences I might have with you there, but I am kind of in Christina's line of thinking in the sense of if I can't really verify something, if it's like she put it, heads I win, tails you lose sort of situation, it seems that me not believing it will kind of give the same effects, right? So it almost seems like God is going to be there whether I'm acknowledging his existence or not, and nothing really changes otherwise. Like,
Yeah.
just kind of seems like a static force of the universe, right? Like gravity.
Yeah, I can see that. But, at the same time, you have to ask yourself what made gravity. And gravity is supposedly a theory. Is, Einstein said that mass bends space and time. So things just go around the space and time, warpage and things like that. So, yeah,
I guess I don't
there's a
know
lot of
why
factors.
gravity has to be made. Why does it have to be created?
Well, and I don't know why it has to be created. But my response to that would be, why is it even there?
Yeah,
Why,
and that's a great question. I can't answer that. I don't think
I have no
Christina can
idea.
either, unless
I have
Christina
no
has a
idea.
doctorate in physics that I'm not aware of.
I promise you I do not.
Okay, yeah, I can't tell you that, but you seem to know why it's there, right? Like, and that's because
I
of
actually
God.
don't.
And
I have no idea why it's.
well, you said it's because God made it, right?
Yeah, God made the laws of the universe is what
Yeah.
I believe, because
Yeah.
who else would make the laws of the universe?
Yeah, I think that's where we're at an
There has to
impasse,
be some
because
sort of.
like, I don't think laws of the universe have to be made. I think they can just be there, or maybe there's some other reason, but I don't know why it has to be the Abrahamic God Yahweh specifically, right? Like, there's nothing that I observe within the laws of physics that say, yes, the same God as Jesus, that guy, he's the one that, did all this. And, that checks out to me. That I have trouble making that connection.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, whenever you just think about it, logically, like let's say your room was empty, right? And nobody ever came to that house. Nobody ever did anything to your room. Your room's just empty, right? And if there wasn't you involved, your room would always be empty. There would be no reason for anything to change. It would just be empty. So, that's kind of the thing I'm getting at.
But I don't know why we know that for a fact. In fact, from what I've read, and Lawrence Krauss, who's a problematic guy now, but he has a book about nothing, right? I think his book is about how can nothingness, how can everything come from nothing? And his argument is basically, well, nothingness is sort of unstable, right? And so it's this idea that even in the things that we think is space, there's even actually things happening in between particles, between what positive and negative energy can create, and how that the interactions just can exist even without matter being there, right? And so it's obviously above my pay grade, right? I'm not exactly the best person to tell you about it, but all I'm putting out there is that physicists have some ideas, right? It's not that they're completely clueless to it, but we don't have absolute ideas. And I think personally, Levi, I'd rather be in a space where I can say, well, I'm not sure, but there's a couple of different ideas, and I can figure out which idea wins best based on evidence, versus just kind of hitching my wagon to, I think God did it. And I don't know how he did it, but I know God did it. To me, that doesn't seem like that's the best path forward, because I still could be wrong about that, right? I'm still sort of hedging my bets on an assumption that, as you put it, you can't verify, right? Like, you can't really prove. So I don't know why I would go down that path.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look, you have nothing. You have nothing to lose if you are a Christian. Now, if you are atheist,
well, I don't know if I agree with that either.
I beg to differ.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. You're a Christian, you go to heaven. If you're not a Christian, then you get thrown into eternal damnation. So
That's
Yeah,
I mean,
Pascal's wager, but
right.
the fact of the matter is this: do you really want to be in heaven with a guy that said, because you didn't want me to be your God, hell with you? Like, that's not a flex. I don't want to
well, he
sit like
doesn't say that.
say it one more time. I'm
He he
sorry.
actually says he actually says that you will go to hell for a short time, not even a short time,
For
but
all of
then you will be
eternity.
cast into the lake of fire, and you
Even
will
worse.
cease to exist.
Yeah,
This argument is going in the wrong direction, friend. Because the fact of the matter is this, right? If for you to posit God as a loving God who wants a relationship with me and loves me so much that he's given me this option to choose, if I choose not to worship this God and the only other option is torture and punishment for eternity, then the fact of the matter is this God does not want a relationship with me. This God wants me to be obedient. This God wants a subject, someone to worship him, and that's just not something I'm willing to do.
yeah.
I don't think that this God, if this God were to exist, this God is not a benevolent God. It's not a good God, right? So I would not worship this God if it were to exist. Especially when you say that the
Okay.
only other option outside of lovingly choosing him is to burn for all of eternity. That's not a God that I want to be associated with.
Um, I mean, I understand that. Yeah, I honestly I had the same argument myself in my mind. I was like, well, if God's gonna throw me in hell and make me torture for the rest of my life, how loving really is He?
Can I ask you
Um,
if that's why
but
is that, and I don't mean to come off rude, so I apologize if I do. Is that why
no, you're fine.
you are in a relationship with Christ, with God, with this God? Are you afraid?
No, it's not that I'm afraid. It's just all the scientific and historical evidence.
For
Like I said, I've researched being atheist before, uh,
well,
and there's just too
an
much
atheist is
evidence.
just a person who doesn't have a belief in a God or God. So when you say you've researched atheism, I'm, I'm not
hmm
exactly sure what you mean by that. We don't have like a
I've researched
doctrine.
life without a God. I've researched if life is logically reasonable, without a God existing, and
Do you
all
think
the
the
research.
well, sorry to interrupt you, but do you think the scientists that research abiogenesis, they would come to your conclusion? They would say, yeah, actually, this life stuff doesn't make sense. Like, it's not reasonable for us to come from evolution. Like, because like
Well,
I'm, yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry. No, you go ahead.
Well,
I
well,
apologize.
I'm just saying because I've looked at what some of them have had to say, and they're pretty much on my side of the fence, which is, yeah, this has a source, right? That seems to be natural in origin, and every year they're picking together more and more of these pieces of how that works. And I agree with you, the picture is not complete, but it's more complete now than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And you can actually look at the history of those ideas and see how much more complete it's become since people have first started researching this decades ago. So when you say that you've researched if it's logical or not, I'm curious as to whose research you're looking at, because I don't know if it's the people who are actually doing the work and figuring this out, because they have a very different conclusion from you.
Well, you see, in the science world, a lot of scientists that they are, proclaiming God or whatever, they'll get excommunicated from the scientist or science world, whatever you want to call it, science industry. Nobody will back them,
Really?
scientifically from them or anything. Yeah.
Do you have a source for that?
Yeah.
I don't
I'm
find
curious
that.
who's being excommunicated.
I can actually look it up right now, but I've seen many stories just of scientists in general claiming God and then being discredited by the science community uh, because
Well,
science is kind of like hey, we believe in what came to be without God, because if we believe in God, then I guess we're not full scientists. I'm not exactly sure what their thought process is on that, but
Yeah, I think that's something that you're positing. I don't know that to be the I don't know that to be the case. In fact, if you have a source for that that proves that, then fine, right? But the thing about science is that science is a process. We are constantly learning new things and relearning and changing and evolving and watching how things evolve and constantly using our scientific method to research and understand the world around us. And it's such a micro down to a micro level. But when you speak about a God, your only evidence is faith itself. Faith is the evidence, right? So there's no evidence that would be required for you to believe in this God. In fact, to have this, to posit this belief, you really can't look for evidence because faith, according to the text, is faith is the evidence, right? Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the evidence itself. So we could show you research and data and archaeological data and things like we could show you that all day long. At the end of the day, it boils down to your faith and your belief in a God because there is no factual or objective evidence for him.
Well, yes. Now, if you mention things like, regressing disease or whatever it may be, but first let me mention one scientist who was pretty much excommunicated. Jonas Kepler was excommunicated. He was a pioneering astronomer.
Johannes Kepler?
Yeah, Johannes. Yep, that's correct.
Yes. Well, he was a lot of things.
God's design.
Yeah. He had a lot of different beliefs actually. Like he was into like astrology and some other kinds of stuff too. Like it was more than just the God stuff that he had issues with on that. But to be honest with you, we are over time on this call than what we usually do. So I do need to start wrapping some things up here with you, Levi. What I will say is I find it interesting. You seem to be convinced by the probability sort of arguments, whether something is more probable or not.
Very probable, yes.
Yeah, and I find that fascinating because again, I don't know what the probability of a God existing and doing all of his stuff would be, so I'd be curious to know about that. I think your arguments kind of rely on the negative probability, which is like, oh, well, what's the likelihood that God didn't do these things, that it all happened through natural stuff? And I think if you look at what folks have been doing in abiogenesis research, you'd be surprised at the amount of explanations that are found within that science, especially today in 2025, and seeing how much we actually do know about the early periods of life and how we've got here to this point. Because they're not saying what you might be thinking that they're saying there. But I'm going to leave it at that because we do got to let you go, Levi. Thanks so much for calling in. I hope you can call in some other time. Yeah, have a great weekend.
I actually had a great time doing this, so thank you for having me.
Fantastic.
But, let me just say one last thing, and it's not that I'm, negative about the whole thing. It's just more of a logical sensing, like
I hear you.
If there wasn't a God, then it's not even about life at this point. It's about the entire universe. Why do we even exist? Why are we even here? We shouldn't be anything at all.
Well, we got to take it one topic at a time, right? But, those are all great questions that I don't know the answers to myself, to be honest with you. But exactly. I'm not convinced that Christianity necessarily gives you those answers either. But like I said, we got to let it go. Thanks again, Levi, for calling. Hope you can call in again at some other time. So that was an extended conversation, but I thought that was pretty good. What'd you think, Christina?
I enjoyed the conversation. I really do. And I can't say that I get it, right? Because I honestly just don't care. Like when people talk about like how we got here, but how did we get here? I don't know. Like I know how I got here. I know how babies get here. You know what I mean? But I don't care how the universe started. I had nothing to do. I wasn't there, right? And I think sometimes we harp on that to speak to like how almighty this God is in this belief. But when we when we try and make this practical, he's like nowhere to be found. So it's like he can do all this this intricate detail in creating the universe, but he can't feed starving children. That's just,
Right. We talk so much about how the cancer remission occurs, and we don't talk about how much the cancer started in the first
right,
place.
right, right,
Right.
right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, it kind of cuts both ways. And
Mhm.
it always comes, I find the cancer stuff funny because all the other diseases that we've figured out vaccines for or other, greater treatments for, that stuff, we can explain that. But the cancer stuff, now that's a mystery, right? And it's because, we're at the limits of our
Yeah,
scientific knowledge. That's why it's
right.
a mystery. That's why we think God's doing something with it. I don't know. Like, would a Christian think that they didn't get polio because God prevented it for them or because they got the polio vaccine? I don't know. Like at that point, it's right. It's a bit
Right.
trivial, but with
Yeah.
cancer, when there's only limited treatment options, right? Somehow God's in
Of
the
course
mix.
it was God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Had to be.
I don't know. But a lot of different points. We can go down a bunch of rabbit holes of that conversation.